Hi, my name is Hubwood, and today we will take a closer look at the brand new Acer Swift 3 with the AMD 6-core, the Ryzen 5 4500U. And this CPU contains an integrated GPU, the Vega 6, and let me tell you why I think that this is a really great laptop for students. But before we check the look and feel of this laptop, let's have a look at the hardware details first. Now, the specific model that I've tested is the Acer Swift 3 SF314-42-R54P, and of course there are quite a few variants of this laptop available, so yours might be a bit different. As I said before, this brand new subnotebook comes with a Ryzen 5 4500U, which is one of AMD's newest 6-core mobile CPUs. In contrast to its bigger brother, the 4600U, it does not have multi-threading, but it can compensate that with a higher base clock. To be specific, it has a base clock of 2300, a maximum turbo clock of 4000, but the maximum all-core turbo was around 3700, which drops down after a few seconds of full load. And of course, it comes with the integrated GPU, the Vega 6, on which we will take a closer look later. Furthermore, we have 8GB of DDR4 RAM with 3200 MHz, which unfortunately is not able to be expanded, and that's the main con I have for this laptop, but more about that later. The installed SSD is a 512GB NVMe SSD by Samsung, and it's very fast. It can achieve around 1900 megabytes of reading and 1300 megabytes of writing speed, measured when the drive was around 50% filled. Then we have a 48 watt-hours battery, which is supposed to last up to 11.5 hours in idle according to Acer, and around 5 to 7 hours when working on regular load. I've actually tested it under full load with Assassin's Creed Origins and achieved a runtime of around 2 hours, which is pretty decent for such a small laptop. A small 65 Watt PSU, a fingerprint sensor which did not seem to work in like 40% of the time I was trying to use it, and last but not least, a 14-inch IPS screen with Full HD and 157 dpi with a maximum brightness of 219 CD per square meter, and a sRGB coverage of only 55%, which is not enough for creative professionals that need to rely on color accuracy. Now, the Swift 3 weighs only 1.2 kilo or around 2.6 pounds and is really flat, with a height of only 1.7 centimeters, making it a very mobile companion for students and of course field workers as well. Or if you're just looking for a very small laptop for your personal use, of course. Now, the laptop comes with a full aluminium covered body with a very stylish and slick design, which is making it look valuable and sturdy. On the left side, we do have a power connector, an HDMI port, and a USB-C as well as a USB 3.2 port. On the right side, we only have a USB 2 port, which is mainly intended for an external mouse and a Kensington lock, as well as a regular headphone jack. So there is no LAN port and only 2 regular USB ports, which is not uncommon for such small subnotebooks these days. Oh, and by the way, you need to use both hands to open the laptop. Oh, and by the way, this is what the integrated camera looks and sounds like. Now, the screen does not flex very much. If you bend it like this, which is very good, it seems to be very sturdy and stable. The keyboard does have an illumination option, of course, but note that it only is able to be turned on and off. There's no steps between this. But in my opinion, that's just unnecessary anyway. And aside from the illumination part, I kind of have mixed feelings about the keyboard. It actually looks and feels kind of cheap, but it does feel good to write with. And of course, please mind that in such a small laptop there is usually no dedicated numpad that is important to you. And the same mixed feeling goes for the trackpad. It actually looks and sounds really cheap, but it's great to use, it's very precise, it's great to work with, and even though the click just sounds like plastic, it still feels good. Now, as I said before, the screen only has a sRGB coverage of 55%, and the maximum brightness is okay, but not enough to comfortably using it out in the sun. Fine gradients actually fade out a bit and it becomes hard to distinguish close colors. But if you're a creative professional which needs a high color accuracy, this probably is not the price range you are supposed to look anyway. And unfortunately, my unit suffered from a production error considering the monitor. The whole screen seems to be turned counterclockwise a bit to some degree, and I'm pretty sure this didn't happen to all the Swift 3s out there, but as I never experienced something like this before, I had to mention it nonetheless. And if I would keep the laptop, which I won't, I would probably send it back and demand a refund or a new device because there are actually some pixels missing. Now the speakers are kind of mediocre. They don't have much bass, but they are actually okay and could have been worse considering the laptop size and the fact that they are pointed downwards. But I mean, headphones, right? And now let's talk about the performance, shall we? Now Acer usually is pretty quick with equipping their notebook series with the newest CPUs, which is why the Acer Swift 3 is one of the first models to actually ship with one of the new Ryzen Zen 2 processors. Considering this is such a low power CPU, I am really surprised with the performance it delivers. In the case of this laptop, I measured around 15 to 20 watt of CPU usage. And by the way, the whole laptop was drawing only 31 watts from the wall when gaming at max. But of course that means that the GPU and the CPU have to share around 20 to 25 watts if you leave the rest to mainboard and the monitor and stuff like that. Yes, I've tried to undervolt the laptop, which didn't work because one throttle stop didn't seem to work at all. And as far as I know, it would not make much sense to undervolt a Zen 2 processor anyway, because if you do that, they lose performance. Now, the 6-core Zen 2 processor managed to deliver around 800 points in Cinebench R15 in the first run and around 750 points in the following runs. For Cinebench R20, it's around 1975 points in the first run and around 1890 points in the following runs, which is a normal drop for a low power CPU. And if you compare this score to a regular desktop CPU, the score per watt is just insane. I mean, those CPUs are very, very efficient, and that's just amazing. Now, as I said before, the SSD is very fast, and combined with a such fast multi-core CPU, daily tasks are just running buttery smooth, and the laptop boots up within 20 seconds, and it's just a pleasure to work with it, really. And one thing that I have to point out is how silent it is. I mean, on idle and light tasks you barely can hear the fans working, and even on full load it's just not annoying. It's really quiet and acceptable for such a small laptop. And even though it's so quiet, the CPU never went above 90 degrees Celsius and thermal throttling was not an issue, measured at a room temperature of 21 degrees Celsius. The GPU's boost clock is kind of unstable, which is not uncommon because considering it's a 15 to 25 watt CPU containing both CPU and GPU, and depending on the game and the scene you're playing, the GPU and CPU will need to share those few watts in the best possible way, resulting in lower boost frequencies. Now let's talk about gaming. Before I'm coming to my final conclusion, let's have a look at the gaming performance of this machine. By the way, I am planning to post an extended clip with more games on this integrated APU, so if you don't want to miss this, please make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. I need to point out that I've tested most games at a resolution of 1280 by 720p or 1600 by 900p to get better or even playable frame rates. But to be honest, gaming at 1280 by 1720p looks just okay on such a small 14-inch screen, because it has the same pixel density or PPI as gaming with 1080p on a FullHD 23-inch screen. Now first I fired up Firestrike and achieved a score of up to 2700 with a graphics score of 3000 and a very high physics score of 10,040, which is performance-wise almost as fast as a Nvidia MX 150 or between a 840M and a Nvidia 850M. Yes, this laptop can even run some AAA titles like Shadow of the Tomb Raider if you're willing to use a resolution of 1280 by 720 and the lowest settings with activated shadows to get playable frame rates. I saw an average of 32 FPS and a 1% low of 25 FPS. For Fortnite I was using 900p with lowest settings except for the highest viewing distance and weirdly the highest texture quality, because otherwise the trees would load and looked super weird. But even with those settings I was able to get an average of around 75 FPS and a 1% low of 42, which is absolutely playable and highly enjoyable in my opinion. CSGO was one of the few titles I've tested in 1080p and it gave me around 92 FPS on average with a 1% low of 56 FPS, perfectly playable. But then again, you know what they say, even a toaster can run CSGO these days. In GTA 5 I saw an average of 46 FPS and a 1% low of 25 with 900p and a mix of medium and high settings. I would consider this a good compromise of look and performance for a single player title. It's incredible what kind of games you can run these days with such a small laptop with an integrated GPU. But please keep in mind that newer titles probably won't run because of the lack of VRAM or the real RAM that you use in the laptop. For example, Red Dead Redemption 2 or Call of Duty Warzone probably wouldn't run at all. But then of course this is not a gaming laptop. It's just a super nice to have add-on. Now I really think this is a great laptop considering its value, the price you'll pay and what you get for it. It might be the perfect combination for many students out there that like to have a great performing device with maximum mobility and the option to play some lighter games. Or even some AAA titles with lower resolutions and settings. Now my pros are, it has a very slick look, it's very mobile and flat and lightweight. And due to its low power consumption, the battery life is really good. It is really silent and it's not getting warm at all. And the keyboard and touchpad are actually okay and very usable. And it does have some gaming power that you probably wouldn't expect from such a small laptop without a dedicated GPU. Now the cons are that my biggest concern is the 8GB of RAM, which is not expandable. And 8GB might be okay right now, but probably won't be enough in 1 to 3 years. If you can afford it and gaming or heavier software is on your to-do list, then get a model with 16GB instead. And you have to keep in mind that the GPU has to use the regular RAM as VRAM, which is why I would recommend to always use low settings and low resolutions to make sure games won't need too much VRAM. And I really hope that I just had bad luck with the screen production error, but that's kind of a small no-go. Oh, and some games seem to crash here and there, and I guess that was due to the lack of VRAM. Now, that is all for today. Please subscribe to the channel or hit the like button if you liked what you see, that would help a lot. Thank you. Thanks for watching, see you next time, bye bye and tschüss.